Hi, everyone. Good evening. Thank you so much for joining tonight. My name is Benay Hershon, and I'm the Community Engagement Director of the Conservation District. And Amanda, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure, thanks, Benay. Amanda Littleton with the Conservation District as well. We're excited to have everybody here tonight. Thank you.
Awesome. So thank you all again so much for joining. So tonight we're really just going to dive in about the Monadnock Food Co-op Farm Fund. So just an overview of the Zoom call this evening. We're going to start by going over just the basics of the grant, a little bit more about what we're looking for in the applications, and then we'll turn it over to all of you to do a round of questions and answers. So, and as the evening goes on, if you have any questions, you can feel free to put them in the chat. But we'll also leave time at the end to answer those questions. So I guess we'll just start with a quick round of introductions. So if you'd like to unmute yourself, maybe turn your camera on, or if you'd prefer to share in the chat, it would be great just to know your name, where you're tuning in from tonight, your farm name, what type of farm, and why you're interested in this opportunity and how you heard about the grant. Would anyone like to get us started?
I can. My name's Jason. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Thanks so much.
Yeah, my name's Jason Woodworth. My partner Elsbeth and I run Newbie River Farm over in Peterborough, New Hampshire. Yeah, I've used to work for Farmer John's plot. We've applied for the grant before. Yeah, we just do a small CSA. Interested in expanding our wholesale operations. Currently sell to the greengrocer, a few other places around Peterborough. Yeah, that's about it.
Awesome. Thanks so much for kicking off introductions, and thanks for tuning in.
Of course,
would anyone else like to jump in and share an introduction?
I'm Dan Field. My wife Megan and I co-own Bending Branch Farm, and currently based in Francistown and Hancock, but possibly moving closer to Cheshire County. And we run a small goat dairy and creamery, and we're looking at trying to build out a new milk room and creamery space.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for tuning in and for sharing. Would anyone else like to jump in?
I don't know if you can hear me.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, I can't see me, so but I'm here to find out more about how this process works.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Sandy. Anyone else like to introduce themselves? And you can also feel free to do so in the chat if that's easier. Okay, great. Well, thank you all so much for sharing. It's just nice to see some faces. Oh, it looks like Bobby introduced themselves in the chat. Thanks so much for tuning in, Bobby. Great. So just an overview of the mission of the Farm Fund is to really support local farmers and farmers who are committed to wholesale production and increasing sustainable food production and the viability of their operations to contribute to a thriving local economy. And this year, just a little bit of an overview, the Farm Fund will be awarding up to $30,000 to help farms in Cheshire County, as well as abutting New Hampshire towns to develop and expand their production for wholesale markets. So this includes selling to the Monadnock Food Co-op and Food Connects. Farmers can apply for grants ranging from $500 to $20,000 for this grant round. And those funds can be used to support a wide range of projects. So that can include the purchasing of equipment and infrastructure, packaging and label design needs, as well as technical assistance. And this year, we're really excited to announce the expansion of this work. And we'll also be funding projects that focus on farmland conservation, which is just a really great addition to this fund. Overview on eligibility. So eligible applicants include farms in Cheshire County and abutting New Hampshire towns. And this is really for farms who are focusing on expanding or developing their production for wholesale markets. And as mentioned before, that includes the Monadnock Food Co-op and Food Connects. More on eligibility, farm businesses must be in operation for at least 1 year and have secure access. So that can be owning or a secure lease to the land on which the operator is farming. So if you're renting, the lease needs to be in writing, and it, just to ensure the sustainability of these funds, it needs to be a long-term lease. And enough for the farmer to complete the proposed project and see a return on the investment. So to receive funding, the farm must operate also in compliance with all applicable federal, state, and local regulations. And projects will need to be signed consent and approval of the appropriate governing body or landowner. So for example, if you're renting, it just means that whoever you're leasing the land from needs to also be aware of this project and needs to really give the okay. So just an overview of some of the eligible projects through the fund and examples of projects that we've funded in past years. So food safety, planning, and infrastructure. We funded equipment for efficient and sustainable food production and harvesting. We've also funded food storage infrastructure, equipment for value-added food production, packaging and labeling development, including the design of logos and other materials for packaging, as well as cost share for technical assistance. And this includes business and financial planning from the New Hampshire Community Loan Fund or other reputable providers. And just to add to this list of eligible projects, I'd encourage you all to take a look at the Farm Fund page on our website, and I'll pop a link in the chat later on, just so you can take a look and see. There's a really nice list and overview of the different farms that have been awarded this fund throughout the years, and it goes into detail on what projects we've funded. So I just feel like it's very helpful to get more of an idea of things that could guide your application. And this is just the new addition that I had already mentioned to this year. We're going to be able to provide support to critical farm infrastructure and necessary capital improvements for long-term farm viability. This is only available for farms who have been established and contributing to the agricultural economy for more than 10 years. So just, keep that in mind, that within those projects, there's that 10-year guideline. But as well, there's going to be funding for supporting farmland conservation. So this could include succession planning or attorney fees associated with the permanent protection of farmland. And I'm just going to hand it over to Amanda for the next slide.
Great, thanks, Danae. So we've talked about what's eligible. So here's what is not eligible to be funded through this project, and that's farm staff time, advertising, any research or feasibility studies, basically any efforts that's not going to have a direct tie to increased production and sales. And then day-to-day operational costs, things that you would just need for the regular operation of your business, such as seeds or mulch or something like that. All right. So where's the priority given? So really, we want to be able to see in your application that whatever you're applying for is going to have a direct benefit to your farm through increased profitability. We want to be able to show that whatever investment you make is going to help you either be more efficient or more productive to be more profitable. So improving the viability of your business. And it's also going to be really tied to wholesale market expansion. So even though this grant is partially funded through the Monadnock Food Co-op, doesn't have to be strictly through the co-op. It could be wholesale markets, including restaurants, other grocery stores, institutions. It really could be a variety. It's just to try to show that you're diversifying sort of your pool outside of just direct to consumer. I want to show that the market, there's market demand for whatever you're asking to do, so that if you're increasing your production, for example, that you know that you have a market for those products that you're producing. And that it makes sense, really. The cost benefit analysis really just means, like, is this a smart use of funds? Does this make sense for your business? And does it have a significant impact on the long-term viability of your farm? All right. So as Vinay had mentioned earlier, we've got about $30,000 to give out in this funding cycle, and projects from 500 to 20,000, which is a pretty large range. And we have funded projects all around that range. So if you have some idea, something that you want to do, and it's only, you know, $1,000, like, please don't hesitate to apply, because that might be a really great fit for this grant project. And how it works is that program participants must save and provide receipts about expenses during the contract period, because we do this based on a reimbursement basis, the way the grant works. And we cannot be funding things that happen prior to the grant award. Okay. So as I said, it's a reimbursement basis. So projects will be funded upon the completion of the project and the submission of the final report. Just something to think about as you're planning your projects and how you're going to cash flow things. If cash flow is a concern, we can make up to 50% of the project costs of the grant, basically 50% of the grant available to you at the very start of your project, if it will help you with cash flow and making it more successful in the long run. So what's the timeline? So let's see, it's the 5th of January here. We're just a little less than a month from February 1st when the grants are due. So during the month of February, after the grants are in, there's a selection committee that reviews the proposals, and decisions are made and announced by March 15th. At that point, the applicants who are successful will complete a contract, and then we're going to ask them to be able to complete their project by the end of the calendar year. And so that's really an important factor when thinking about what can you realistically accomplish in a single calendar year with this project. So it's sort of like a shovel-ready project, something that you are excited and ready to get going on right away this year. All right. So what to include in your application? So this, if you've reviewed the application, you'll notice that there's a narrative section that we're asking folks to write 1,000 to 1,500 words. So we're not looking for this huge lengthy thing. We really just want to get down to understanding what your needs are, how you're going to do it, and how you're going to be successful. So we ask you to describe your project. That's the brief summary, sort of the overview, the whole thing. And then what's the need or the opportunity this project will address? So what is the problem basically that you're addressing? Then what are the goals of your project overall? How is it going to help your farm business? And then there's a question about tasks and timeline. And this is where we sort of want you to get into detail to make sure that you've thought through sort of what are all the steps that your project is going to entail. And then we have questions in the grant that ask you to describe your current wholesale product distribution and what percentage of farm sales they make up. Then there's this follow-up question that asks you, okay, then if that's where you're at now is your baseline, if you implement this project, how is this going to improve your ability to increase your wholesale production? So based on where you were now, if you do this project, how much more wholesale production and sales do you plan to have? So that is really a budgeting, looking into the future. But it really is helpful to better understand the level of impact a project may have on farm. All right. So describing the capacity of your farm on how to complete this. So that's really just saying, like, for example, if you're going to be doing a construction project to build out some infrastructure on your farm, we want to know, like, all right, if you're going to be taking on some of this, do you have that level of experience, or are you hiring a contractor who has the proper experience to be able to implement a project successfully? Just want to be kind of gives us a sense of sort of who's your team to make this successful. And then if you're willing to work with the conservation district and the food co-op on public awareness, that's really important, because we want to be able to share what awesome work is happening in the agricultural community with our larger community. And so we're often looking for folks to be able to share about their project and about how it's impacted their farm in a positive manner. And not everybody wants to do that in the same way. So if you're not excited about having an event at your farm, that's fine. Maybe you'd be willing to sort of co-write a press release with us that we could put out about the success of the project. So there's a lot of ways that we can do that that can be comfortable for folks' different sort of interest level. What about your plan for covering ongoing costs after a grant is completed? So what's the sustainability look like? If it's a project that buying a piece of equipment that's going to need regular maintenance, we just want to make sure you're planning for that and are willing to take that into your regular working budget on your farm. And then how will you know you're successful? This one is key. We want to better understand sort of what metrics and targets you're using to measure. So for example, like if you have storage capacity for 2 pallets right now of storage crops, and then you're going to install some more infrastructure on your farm for crop storage, perhaps it's going to allow you to store 6 pallets instead of 2. All right, well, that probably can be quantified in dollars, right, of how much that's going to impact your sales on your farm. So those are the types of things we're really looking at there, about how are you going to be targeting success. Another way is, like, maybe if you're installing something that's really energy efficient, and this is going to save you money in the long run on your energy bills, then this would be that'd be another way to be able to quantify the success of the project. And then if there's any broader benefits to the community. Now, not every project is going to have broader benefits to the community. I'll give you an example of one in our first grant round that did have this, though. We had a farm wanted to get additional freezer storage on their farm. So they installed large enough freezer space for themselves, but seasonally they were going to have additional space available that they're going to make available to other farmers and community members for like a very low rental fee to be able to help offset the needs throughout the season. So that would be sort of a larger community benefit example. All right. So we've talked about the budget, 500 to 20,000. So we really want you to think about the whole project budget. Want to think about what your contributions are as an individual in a farm business, as well as what you're asking for. So, for example, if your time is of value, and you should include that as part of the match, as well as any materials that you're going to be contributing to it. Perhaps you have a NRCS equip cost share that's currently open, and maybe some of those funds are helping to go to your project, but you're asking for dollars from this co-op fund to help sort of build the rest of that project out. Well, we want to see that too. We want to see sort of like, what is that mix of funds? What's that funding stack look like that's going to allow you to be successful in this project? All right. So what's allowable expenses? Equipment and installation by qualified contractors and professional services. Like we said before, farm staff hours aren't allowed to be billed for, but we do want you to capture that in the match because it shows what you're contributing to the project. And then no more than 20% of the budget can be consumable items. So for example, if you're asking for funding for help with marketing assistance, maybe you're getting a website created, logo creation, and then you want to get some some nice packaging with that new logo, with the website link and all that. So we want to limit those consumables, those throwaway type items, to less than 20% of the grant, because that kind of starts to get into day-to-day operational expenses instead of like a long-term impact investment on your business. And then the last piece of it is, outside of just the numbers, providing a budget justification narrative, which is just a fancy way of explain yourself. Basically, we want to understand, like, okay, you came up with these numbers. How did you get some estimates? Maybe even if you wanted to attach them to your grant to show, like, okay, I called a fencing company and they provided me with this estimate. And so I didn't come up with it out of midair. I did some research. And it really helps sort of the selection committee realize, like, they have done their homework and they know that this is going to be feasible based on the budget that they put forth. Because right now, more than ever, I'm sure you all know, prices have been skyrocketing on goods. And so coming up with some quotes to make sure that you have realistic expectations on what you can accomplish with the dollars you ask for is more important than ever. All right, so creating a strong application, being realistic and efficient with an efficient budget, getting quotes and estimates like we were just talking about, having that strong narrative that explains sort of why you came up with these numbers, and being thoughtful about your answers in the other narrative. And really targeting in on how are you going to be increasing farm profitability? How are you going to help you increase your wholesale production or sales? And if it's meeting market demand, have you demonstrated based on your current purchasers of your products, for example, that they're asking for more, that you have a market already? That goes a long way with the selection committee. If you can show, like, I have market demand, people are asking for this, but I say, for example, but I don't have the storage capacity to make sure that product stays in good shape for a long, for a long enough window to be able to get it to folks. Yeah, so that's an important one. We can dig into that if you have certain examples or questions. And then the other thing we'll just leave you with here is that if you have a draft of an application that you're working on and you have questions about it outside of this info session, you can call me, you can call Benet, you can email us, you can send us drafts of your application. And we are excited to go over it one-on-one with you. We're excited to share feedback and offer suggestions on what may make it a more competitive application, because we are not part of the selection committee. We're really here to help farms, walk farms through the process. And so at that, I think we're ready to open it up to questions and hear your thoughts about your projects and see if we can sort of go through any ideas that you have. So after sort of hearing the overview and you guys having a chance to review the application and the RFP, does anyone have a project idea that they want to sort of bounce off of us and talk through, or any particular questions holding you up on the application that you're just not sure what we're looking for?
I don't have any specific application questions, but is this slideshow available for us to view, or?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I will send a follow-up email to you all with a link to the slides, recording, and just our contact information, so you can reach out to us if you have any questions.
Great, thanks.
I guess I have one question. With, I mentioned that we're looking at moving to a new property closer, or actually it's in Cheshire County. And so part of what we're looking at is building out our barn infrastructure. The property has a barn, but we need to set up like the licensed milk room and creamery space. Would it be better for us to focus our application on, like, we need a specific piece of equipment, like a bulk tank or a pasteurizer or something, or to say we just want money to go towards building out a room or something like that?
Good question. We funded specific equipment, and we've funded sort of rooms as well, building out rooms for specific needs. I think it's potentially a safer bet to be asking for specific equipment, because it may be easier to quantify sort of how that equipment is going to impact your business. If you're too broad with what you're looking for, sometimes the selection committee feels like it's like you're not narrowed in enough on your needs and in what can most help your farm. I'm not saying that's the situation in your case, because it sounds like, you guys are in a unique situation where you're going to have a brand new property and lots of infrastructure needs. I just would be really thoughtful in the application about being as specific as possible about the space that you're going to do and your goals with that space, based on sort of your baseline starting point and where you want to go. I'd also just say that if you still plan to operate, I believe you said Hancock was one of the towns, right, that you're currently operating in, Dan?
Yes, that's right.
So Hancock is actually, I believe, it's a border community with Cheshire County. It's right on the edge, right? And so that is eligible already for this grant. So this grant is eligible for Cheshire County towns and neighboring towns. So if I just put that out there, because if you plan to continue your operations in Hancock, for example, and you've had infrastructure and equipment needs on that site already identified, that would also be eligible for this.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah. Anybody else have any thoughts or questions? Want to kind of talk through what an example project might look like?
Would you mind sharing like an example of one of them that got funded last year? I know Partners Gardens was, I think, one of last year's projects.
Partners Gardens, yeah, they've gotten funded twice through this.
They did like a greenhouse, I think, last year, maybe solar passive.
Yeah, passive solar propagation house. And so that was a really great proposal. That ranked one of their highest ranking proposals in it, because they were able to very clearly show what their baseline infrastructure looked like, how the investment would help them be able to grow more, produce more, and do it in a really efficient manner that was going to not be energy intensive. So it's going to sort of save them money in the long run as well. So any investments of equipment or infrastructure, that's something to be thinking about, is like, what is that long-term impact on your business as well? If it's really efficient, if it's going to be makes sense, sort of with the climate challenges we're having, with the rising energy costs that we're all seeing as well. But like with them, they were able to be like, okay, we can only fit this many trays, right, of starts in where we're currently doing it. And this is going to allow us, they could give us the exact numbers to go from X number of trays to Y number of trays, and how that was going to help them expand their season, sort of into the shoulder seasons more, and how it is going to help with their profitability, just in the overall, how smooth their operations were going to be with that investment. And so really just painting that storyline is critical, sort of showing like, where are you now? This is the problem with where you are now. Okay, if I make this investment, sort of, that's where I'm going. Once I get there, what is it going to look like? How much more successful? So really painting that picture for the selection committee, because I think one thing to keep in mind is that not all of the selection committee are farmers. There are some farmers on there, but there are often local food supporters, enthusiasts, etc., board and staff members of the Conservation District and the Monadnock Food Co-op. And so really not making assumptions that they might understand like what the implications of an investment look like. Really trying to spell it out as much as possible will help your application.
Okay, thank you. Have you funded any irrigation projects in the past?
Through the farm fund. Trying to think if we've done here.
I can just let you know, like one of our problems now, we farm at the New Banusik co-housing community in Peterborough. And we have a well that we're on, and we have a couple fields near that well that we use, but we have fields that are out in our hay field that are further away, and we have no access to water out there except through a gas powered pump that we have to literally turn on pretty much every day in the summer. And I'm not talking about like getting funding for a well, but closer to, and our 2 hoop houses are out there. And we only have one near the well, and we were thinking about putting a smaller one closer to the, where the well is, and running, buried lines to that. So I was wondering if that would be something that would be fundable. Or
yeah, I'm just thinking it through. So the request would be for the buried lines to be able
buried
to
lines,
irrigation to new houses, or new to you for production houses. Is that fair?
Yeah. And we can like say, we like growing out in the tunnels, but it requires, a lot of irrigation. And if it was closer on the well that we're currently using, that would be great. Plus we use, gas for that pump, but the houses or the farm is basically on solar, like 100%. So it makes more sense that we're using the current well instead of, gasoline to pump those hoop houses. And it's harder because it's not really within walking distance. It's within like, we have to get on like an electric UTV currently to drive out there, and it just takes so much time. So we're thinking about getting a tunnel closer, and then just running irrigation lines underground.
Oh, key things that I heard when you were just talking about that are saving time with labor. So trying to quantify that a little, what that labor savings will be on an annual basis. And that, not exactly, right? I'm not looking for a crazy amount of statistics or anything, but just to give us a sense of like, what does that mean for your labor savings? What does it mean for saving of money on fuel costs for you as well, if it was bringing in? So those are sort of things that will help with the efficiency. And then if it's going to increase your overall production, that would be big too, right? So if you're going to be putting new houses into production, or that wouldn't normally be, or would be like underproducing possibly because of their location, I could see that being a really good project for this. It seems like it's hitting a lot of the marks.
That's one of our other problems is we put the 2 hoop houses out there, and now that water is an issue because we've been so dry, that hoop houses closer to the well would make more sense. So even getting funding for one of those, because we can't grow in the shoulder seasons out there because the lines are freezing. And if the lines were buried and the tunnel was closer, it would make so much more sense. And we could grow way more in the shoulder seasons. So that's kind of a limiting factor for us right now.
Yeah, no, that sounds like that makes a lot of sense. I think another thing that really brings up, and I'll just share, it might not be applicable in your situation, but one of the things is that, as you guys probably know, like grants like this for farms, they're not they're not a ton of them out there for buying like equipment and infrastructure outside of the USDA NRCS Environmental Quality Incentives Program, or EQIP. And so we'd often like to see, like with projects, like if you were, for example, asking for a new hoop house, we would probably not fund that, because we know that you can go to our partners at NRCS, and we would try to connect you with them if you weren't already, to get a hoop house, and that they can pay for, 75% of the costs of add-on. But if it's about taking an existing hoop house and making it more accessible and like helping you with sort of that sort of all those other points in between, then yes, it's complementary to our federal partners funding. That's the kind of thing that we love to see, because this funding is limited. We don't want to be funding things where there's large pools of federal funds available for it.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah. And so, I mean, as you guys are thinking about other potential questions to ask or comments, just want to reiterate, like, if you get a draft of your application done in advance of the due date, we would be happy to review and provide you with feedback in advance. Like if there's questions that come up for us as we're reading it that we think that the selection committee might also have, we'll give you that feedback back. We'll ask you to make some tweaks or improvements. That way, provide a little more information here or there. So don't hesitate to send those to us. I would encourage you not to send them, the day before they're due. That's typically when everybody reaches out to us, is like within the last couple of days. So the sooner you can get them into us, would be helpful.
If we're sending those into you, should we address them, like email them specifically to you two, or how should we send those in?
Yeah, so if you use the info@CheshireConservation.org email address, that will go to both Benet and myself. And so we'll be able to look at it and provide you with some feedback.
Perfect, thanks.
Yep, then I just put it in the chat. So yeah, that's the best way to share that with us. Or if, again, like, happy to have a one-on-one phone call as well after you've given it some thought, and if you have any specific questions about a potential application. But we're excited to always get new applicants and new applications, because this grant funds quite a few projects every year. And I always like to say, like, if you didn't get funded one year for a project, don't not apply again. Like, we've had so many farms apply and not get funded the first year, and then tweak an application, make it a little bit better, maybe a little more competitive, or change what they were asking for altogether, so it was maybe a better fit for their farm, and then they'll get funded the next year. So don't be discouraged if you do apply one year and don't get funded. It's just because every year the types of projects vary so much, and what amounts of money are available, and the level of how competitive or not it is from year to year changes a lot as well. So we really just encourage you to keep in touch with us and apply. And I think it might be worth just mentioning to you guys as well that if you haven't become familiar with it already, that the conservation districts also have a climate resilience grant program that is also available right now that could be complementary. It funds slightly different things than the Food Co-op Farm Fund does, but you or some of your colleagues, other farms, might be interested in it. So the climate resilience grant is also something to look at, and that is available in every county in the state of New Hampshire through all the different conservation districts. And it's the same due date, February 1st, but I think it's always worth looking at all the grant opportunities that exist and trying to find, based on what your goals are and your needs are, which one is the absolute best fit for you. And some of them, like irrigation, for example, Jason, like the way that you had explained your needs, that's a climate adaptation issue as well. So it may be worth looking at both of them to see which one might be the best fit for you.
And I'll just add that we're having another informational session for that grant on January 9th. So coming up next week at 6 p.m. And I just popped the link in the chat and you can find the registration link there. But it's a really exciting grant round. We're also going to be covering some energy projects this year. So I definitely encourage you all to check it out. And, you know, as Amanda already said, please don't hesitate to reach out to either of us. We're really happy to just, you know, hop on the phone, hop on a Zoom call and just bounce ideas or offer any feedback to your application.
So I guess if anyone doesn't have any further questions or comments, we can wrap things up, but we're happy to just hang on here for another few minutes in case anyone has anything, but just want to say thank you for joining us.